Okay, all righty. Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone to today's shared conversation. My name is Jeff Craven. I'm the Executive Director of NAMTC, which is the National Association of Media and Technology Centers, is comprised of media and technology people that work for regional educational service agencies. Today's topic's really kind of near and dear to my heart. It was a project that I had worked on personally through my former position at the Central Susquehanna Intermediate Unit, and it really talks about telepresence robots and how they're being used in education, and obviously emerging trends and so forth with that. And we've got a host of three great presenters. We have Dr. Soares, we have Pamela Brunskill, Jeff Kay, and Dave Martin, all from various perspectives on how they've deployed this technology, how they're doing research in this technology, and also how it's also impacted them as a parent for their child. So with that, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to turn it over and let them introduce themselves. We'll start. Dr. Soares, would you like to introduce yourselves, please?
Thank you so much, Jeff. My name is Neil Soares. I'm clinically a developmental behavioral pediatrician. So I take care of children with a variety of developmental disabilities, including autism, spectrum disorder, learning disabilities, developmental delays, behavior concerns. The other hat I wear is I have been very interested in technology, particularly telehealth, which bridges the gap between patient and provider across distance using technology. And I'm going to talk today from the perspective of a healthcare provider who sees the tremendous potential of this technology in helping children who are hospitalized for prolonged periods of time to continue to be in touch with their educational environment.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, we also have Pamela Brunskill. Pamela, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm here today as a mom. My daughter Sarah used the robot for a few months after she was home from school because she had leukemia. She missed a full year of school, but for half the year she used the robot, and it really helped her transition. And so I'll be here in that capacity.
Thanks, Pamela. Jeff Kay, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I am the keeper of the robots. I work at the Central Susquehanna Intermediate Unit, and I've had the pleasure of working with Pam and Dr. Soares and Dave as well as Jeff, to place these robots in different settings and school settings for kids to use, both from hospital rooms and classrooms, or their home to classroom. So Jeff asked me on today to show, so you can see the robots in the background. But my experience has been, this has been the best part of my job for the past 2.5 years of using a piece of technology to connect either kids that can't go to school or sick kids to their friends and classmates, as well as, get some education. So thanks for inviting me.
Thanks. And certainly, last but not least, Dave, tell us a little about yourself.
Sure. I'm David Martin. I'm the Director of Technology Services at the Capital Area Intermediate Unit. We're a service agency in Pennsylvania. Before that, I was a teacher and a tech director of one of our local school districts. Where we've had our experience with getting involved with the telepresence robots is when we contacted Jeff, and I've worked with, well, both Jeffs about implementing them. And we're really early at the stages of implementing them. So we, as a service agency serving about 85,000 students, really do a lot of information sharing with newer technologies and things that are out there to educate our school districts and our footprint on like what's available to them. And we purchased them back in the spring, and here to talk about our experiences that we've had just from the beginning of getting them on board and sharing them with everybody.
Great, thank you. So again, as kind of David alluded to, kind of where at least where the CSIU is located in Pennsylvania. I call it kind of the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania. It's fairly rural, right in the center part of the state. And one of the things we had done, and this was actually, I can't say more than enough about the value that an organization such as NAMTC brings to its educational service agency, especially when we're located in rural Pennsylvania. And we'd actually saw these robots presented by another educational service agency in Kansas. They had a student that was recovering from a farming accident, and the robot was basically being used by that student to do a social visit with their classmates. And it was kind of the light bulb kind of went on as we talked and learned more about it. And we thought, there's potential for not only, especially for homebound students and so forth, to attend classes via robots. So that kind of got our project underway. It was really a leap of faith, but we had very strong partnerships all the way throughout this process with administrators, and I can't say more than enough, about the parents and so forth. And I want to kind of use that kind of as a segue to really let Pamela kind of tell her story about how the robot has impacted her and her child and so forth. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Pamela now.
Okay. Thanks, Jeff. And thanks again for inviting me here today. I hope this is helpful to some of you. As I said, my daughter, Sarah, although in all media, I call her Mackenzie. So if you find me online, it's going to be Mackenzie. When she was in 3rd grade, she was diagnosed with leukemia, and we were at Geisinger and real close to the CSIU. And actually one of the CSIU teachers was at the hospital, Barb, who was wonderful, worked with Mackenzie while we were at the hospital. And in the beginning, when she was first diagnosed, that we had several weeks in the hospital. And so Barb was our teacher and our correspondent person to connect with the schools. But then and all cancers are different, but with leukemia, it's a long process. And so some of it is in the hospital and some of it is at home. But regardless, Mackenzie was not going back to school physically. And this began to wear on her very, very quickly. Anyone who has children or works with children know the social aspect is huge for kids growing, especially 3rd grade and up to middle school, high school. Once you get to the age where they start to realize kids are more than parallel playing next to one another, that you're interacting with one another, you're growing with one another, and you're learning from one another, you cannot replace that at home or in a hospital setting. So when Sarah was home, I'm not going to say she was clinically depressed because we never got her diagnosed, but it was obvious she was sad and sullen, and she would stay in her pajamas all day. Didn't want to get out of bed. She would have 2 hours of homework every day that she would or would not do. And sometimes she felt okay doing it, and other times she was literally sick. And I'm a teacher. I taught 3rd grade, I taught 6th grade, I taught pre-service teachers. So I know how important school is, but we could not get her to do anything. And as a parent, I was not overly concerned at that point about what her academics were, but socially, she was down in the dumps. And so I contacted her teacher, and we Skyped a few times, and her homebound instructor came from the schools and was wonderful. She was wonderful. We absolutely love Mrs. Doby, but there's only so much a teacher who comes twice a week can do. And those are the days where Mackenzie would perk up, she'd shower, she'd get changed and get ready for Mrs. Doby to come. But the rest of the time, it was a lot of just moping around the house and watching Disney Channel. And so I emailed her teacher in her class in school, and we tried to Skype several times, but there were a whole lot of technological glitches. And so there was sound on one end and not on the other, and people couldn't see. So there was like a 10-minute, there was a huge getting ready for it, all excitement, and then a huge letdown where she was just really upset after that she didn't get to connect with her friends, and we were not allowing people to come to our house because her immune system was so low that we were afraid of the germs. She could get sick and she would go back to the hospital. So it was the self-imposed quarantine, along with no socialization at school, was a very isolating experience, not to, compounded with a very sick child. So the only people she would see were her family and those who she had to see at the hospital when we would go in for treatment, or when she got sick and would have to go to the hospital again. This wore on her. And so that was third grade. She was diagnosed in January, and this went on until, school let out in May. And we decided we had to do something different for fourth grade. We were not going to continue on the way we had. It was just too isolating for her. So we had heard about the robot from one of my friends who worked with the CSIU. Actually, she, at one of her training meetings, they had shown her a article for another student who had the robot. And she thought maybe it would be something that would work well for Mackenzie. And I looked in, and she had suggested this, I think, in April, so end of third grade. Too late to start for third grade, but we thought maybe it would work for fourth. And that's when I started emailing the principal, the CSIU. We started finding out about it, and we got in touch with her. A lot of people have said, yeah, and let's talk to the special ed director. Let's talk to this person. Let's talk to this person. And everyone said, yeah, sounds good, but let me talk to this person and this person and this one. And months went on, and it was suddenly a week or two before school was starting, and we did not have this robot in place. And if we hadn't pushed for it, because of course educators are, as an educator myself, I know how those back to school weeks are so crazy hectic. But we needed to push for it in order for it to actually happen. And one day I just went in and I emailed every single person that my husband and I talked to on one email and said, can we all work together? Everyone has said yes, but what is holding this up? And quickly things fell into place. I happened to be at the district office, and the superintendent happened to walk by me, and I swear I was not stalking, but he did just happen to walk by and said he got the email. He just signed off on it. So within the first week, Mackenzie had that robot, and what a difference between third grade and fourth grade. My husband is really tech savvy, so he had set up our home computer to have 2 screens plus the iPad, plus a camera for her, so that we had a massive system going on where she could log in to see what was on the teacher's screen, and she could control the robot through the iPad, and she also had another screen for her schoolwork. So it was a tech-heavy classroom. We got a teacher who was super excited about the robot, which made all the difference in the world. Mr. Williams, we would not have been able to do this without him. His attitude was just, this is cool, this is great, she's going to be part of the class. And all the kids were like, oh, hey, Sarah. And she was just literally just part of the class. He plopped the robot in at the end of one of the desks, and she was, called upon in class and worked in small groups with some of her friends for the early morning reading and discussions. So it worked really beautifully in terms of integrating her and making her feel connected again. It does not replace physically being there. I need to make that clear. But it was leaps and bounds better than what she was doing in third grade, which was staying at home in her pajamas. I will say for a few weeks, she stayed at that school station that my husband and I set up for her. We had completely redid our office, so that was her school workspace. But then I was always in the background, and and I'm a little nosy. So I tried to give her space, but, occasionally I'd walk by when I would hear Mr. Williams saying something about Bud Not Buddy. It's like, oh, I taught that book here. I have 6 copies. It's just like, Mom, leave me alone. So it was not very long, maybe 3 weeks before she moved school up into her bedroom and closed the door. And she was, we had made the agreement that we wanted her to log in for maybe 2 or 3 hours a day for the math, language arts, the core subjects, the morning classes. But from day one, she logged on at 8 and stayed until school ended. When did it end? At 3:30, 3:15. She stayed on the entire time. And as the weeks progressed, her classmates would pick her up and take her to the specialist classes. She went for the fun fair, and Ken Williams has a video of it, of her leading the dancing via the robot. And I think I actually have that on my article. So I can, if I can change to share screen, can I do that? I'll try, if I can. Oh. So here is the article on Bright, how a robot allowed my seriously ill daughter to attend school. If you go onto it, you can see, here's what she looked, here's her having some fun in the hospital. I'm looking for the video. I thought I had it here. Okay, so here's her workstation controlling the robot, but down here, that would be the original workstation we set up that she quickly abandoned for her bedroom. And that would be one of the first few, you know, when she was first trying out the station. And here she is, leading the dancing at the school fun fair. So that was, you know, the fun fair was a huge change, because for the beginning part of school, she would not show a picture of herself on screen. Instead, she just had a picture of our dog, Ollie, and she would broadcast that to the class. She was really self-conscious. She didn't have hair, you know, she had lost it all because of the chemo. But again, I'm gonna tout how great Ken Williams was, where he just kept including her, didn't force her to show herself, but just said, Sarah, you have any thoughts? And never made a big deal out of it. And one day she just turned the camera on herself. Nobody asked her to, but she finally felt comfortable to do that. And so then when we did stop in December for, I don't remember why, but we stopped in and she said hello in person. And then when January arrived and she was finally, after a full year, able to go back to school, her class already knew her. And she walked in, she knew the routine, the robot was gone, and she took the place of the robot, and it was a seamless integration. It was a really beautiful stopgap. So, can you all still hear me? Should I mute myself?
Are there any questions for Pam? I mean, what an incredible story. I mean, and by all means, I mean, we'll actually send a link out to the Bright magazine article. That is a great article.
Thanks.
Yeah, I don't see any questions at this time, but you know, certainly anytime there's questions, please feel free to text them. Pamela, again, thank you so much for sharing your story with us, and you've been a huge part of the success of this project. So. Oh,
well, I should also say, Jeff, both you and Jeff, I can't believe I didn't mention you when I was saying how great this all worked. I mentioned Ken, and certainly he was a big part, but without you two being proponents and being willing to work, and so quickly, anytime we needed that robot, you got it there that day or the next day. It was incredible.
This whole experience has been awesome, so really appreciate it. Our next panelist, Dr. Soares, is going to talk about kind of the observations that he's seen from the medical perspective and so forth. And again, being at the hospital and so forth. So, Dr. Soares, if you please want to share with us some things that you've seen and research that you're doing.
Sure. Thank you so much, Pamela. That was so enlightening, because I get to see then the patient's perspective from the home. And really, I had been driven to do more with this, again, by Jeff and Jeff, because I had learned what they were doing with the CSIU in the educational system from home. And as you had alluded to, pediatric cancer takes a lot of time of the child away from their natural settings into outpatient and inpatient settings, but it also includes a whole host of other conditions that children have to endure, everything from transplant and cardiac conditions, and children who have very severe pulmonary conditions. What we're seeing more and more over the years is that children who are hospitalized are actually sicker and sicker than they used to be in the past. There aren't that many one-day hospitalizations for a little IV fluids and go out anymore. These are really kids who are enduring a lot. Complex conditions that require a team approach to care, and they're staying a lot in the hospital, and not every hospital has the opportunity or advantage of having hospital-bound teachers. What we've learned over time is that it takes a very special arrangement with school districts and intermediate units to fund such teachers to be in the hospital, to be able to cover the education of a child. And even then, it's not the same as school. It's for a limited amount of time. And we had a wonderful hospital teacher, as Pamela had alluded to, Barb. But what a hospital teacher can't give a child who's hospitalized is the social connectivity, and the social connectivity with their peers and the natural environment of their school. And so I began thinking about a couple of things. One is, can we use telepresence robots to beam the child in, if you will, to their school, much like they would do from home? There should be no difference. There's Wi-Fi technology. Now many hospitals have tablet devices, either one-on-one tablet devices per bed, or a multitude of tablets available to children through Child Life. And I'll state that the Child Life personnel are critical to success of such an endeavor in an inpatient setting, because they, more than anyone else, understand children's development, partner with families to make sure that the children get the type of developmental nourishment they need, even though they're not at home and with their friends. So I began thinking, what's the best way to do this? And I began to learn about the robots from Jeff and Jeff. We took a couple for a dry run. We began to problem solve what they would do, understanding that the robots themselves would not be in a hospital setting. They would be in the educational setting. It's just the controller device, the tablet device with the control app, would be on the hospital end. So that made it a little easier, so you don't have a robot running down the hallways, tripping up nurses, or getting into the wrong room. The robots would stay in the school, and the controllers would be in the hospital. But what we learned very quickly, like anything else, is that there's a whole lot of barriers, and mostly systemic barriers, that come up to such an endeavor. The big one, of course, becomes funding. I had a lot of naysayers going, well, who's going to pay for these robots? And it's not going to generate any revenue, and, we can't bill for this stuff. And we have to think more globally about the wellness of children and what's in their best interest. You may not be able to bill for a robot or be able to, move the cost of an iPad to a child or their family or the insurance, but it matters about wellness. If they're there to get better, what better way to get them better than to connect them to things that they're missing that make them feel better, their peers, their teachers, their school environment. So thankfully, with a lot of effort and tremendous support from, foundations, private foundations, as well as hospital-based foundations, which had very supportive people, we were able to squirrel away some money for a few robots, which then we promptly shared with the CSIU to be able to take it into the schools. And so between July 2015 and June 2016, we spent a year in a feasibility project. It was not to look at outcomes and not to look at what actually happens, but to look at deployment, because this is something unusual for hospital systems. I mean, there are one-offs like this around the country. Jeff alluded to Kansas University Medical Center, in some places in California, in Canada, but there's no systematic approach where every single child who's hospitalized has the opportunity to connect to their schools. And that's what I had planned to do, is partner with the CSIU and see which children in the CSIU school districts are hospitalized over that period of time, and when, how soon, how effectively could we deploy the robots. And so it went from everything on learning. I learned quickly about contracts and how to write contracts and how to have language in that related to who's responsible if the robot breaks and who's going to spend the time and effort on technology maintenance. It's amazing how much a physician has to do outside of medicine nowadays. So I learned a lot. I learned a lot about contracting. I learned about transportation. How does one take a robot in a timely fashion? Communication styles. How does a hospital-based employee connect with the school-based employee? How does one say the child's ready? Learning to deal with the systems. How does one work with nurses and physicians and allied staff and say, look, if there's a sign on the door saying, I'm in class, respect that and don't just barge in. Maybe knock, come in and say, we have something really important to do. Can you put that on hold? If it's not that important, don't interrupt, because the child's not playing video games on this tablet device. They're actually attending class. So there were a lot of processes that had to be developed by me and Child Life and other people. And I'm proud to say that, a lot of collaboration with staff helped us create that. It was not easy because there was always a question, well, what happens if this person is not there? What happens if the child has to go off for a procedure? What happens if the teacher says, I don't want that thing in my classroom? So we learned about privacy and, how HIPAA is different from FERPA, and then all about, what does technology bring in? We had to reassure people. And I learned that detail. Educate people on the front end so you're not raising suspicions that you've got a robot with a camera in their classroom spying on the other kids. You don't have to get permission from 50 people because we are not actually recording anything. It's live, real-time video conferencing without any recording, without any storage of video, without the risk of anything other than what would happen if a parent was with permission sitting in the classroom. What would happen if the child was sitting in? We did everything we could, including headsets, including making sure we had signs, do not interrupt, making sure if there was a medical procedure, turn your tablet over or cut the microphone and the camera. So I think the year was spent in tremendous feasibility testing in terms of lessons learned. And I think the biggest lesson learned was, how long does it take to put this in motion? So if a child comes in on Monday morning, you can't just deploy this in an hour or 2 hours or even that same day, because it takes everything from predicting how long the child's going to be there, asking permission from the parent, notifying the IU, transporting the robot, getting it set up in the school, having the connectivity tested. So what we learned is the magic figure was somewhere around 48 to 72 hours minimum. It was near impossible to do it in a less time. And you can imagine if this happens on the weekend, you can't do it. If the child gets discharged, then you've got to retrace your steps, get the robot back. So there were lots of lessons learned. And I began to realize why every hospital system is not doing this. But I still am very committed to it. I'm committed to it because I see the potential. I see the potential for someone like Mackenzie, as Pamela talked about. She came home, but Pamela also said she had several weeks in the hospital. And I wish that this was available to Mackenzie for those several weeks in the hospital so that she wouldn't miss a beat. My whole thing is to make sure that children are using their time constructively and helping them socially. Now, this does not endure me to the children because they'd rather be relaxing and watching something because they think they've earned it. But my philosophy has been, if you're well enough to look at a screen, you're well enough to do this. So if you're playing games or watching TV, you're well enough to be in school. But if you're got a ventilator on you, obviously you can do none of those things. But if you're well enough, and obviously if you're not in pain and you're not suffering, then that's an exception. But some kids, get better soon. And this actually may help them feel better. Seeing your best friend and saying, how are you doing? I miss you. Maybe helps them. And that would be the next phase that I'm looking at. What are the outcomes? What are pain outcomes? What are satisfaction outcomes? What is wellness, the quality of life, as they call it, outcomes? Feasibility was part one. I intend to pursue this in the future. And I'm just grateful for partnerships like we have with educators and parents to be able to do this.
Thank you, Dr. Soares. We do have one question. I guess this is for Pamela, from one of our participants. Wanted to know, how did the classroom students interact with your daughter?
Well, again, I'm going to bring up Ken Williams again, the teacher. He was phenomenal in terms of just classroom management and including all students. So he treated Sarah as though she wasn't physically there, but she, could you hear me? Yeah, okay. So she wasn't actually physically there, but he treated her kind of like she was. So he would look at the robot and call on her so that the students got used to doing the same thing. And there were times when they were doing their Newsomatic, and Newsomatic is the daily newspaper for kids, and now I write for Newsomatic. But at the time, that was just how Sarah and her class got their daily news and did their morning reading. And so there are questions that follow the readings. And so Sarah, Mackenzie, would do the readings on her iPad at home. She'd click on the articles for Newsomatic, and then she would talk with her two friends who were at her table, and they would compare answers and talk about what it was. So they treated her as another student, and whenever they could, they would include her.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, I don't see any other questions right at the moment, but let's go ahead and let's move on to Dave Martin, and Dave, give us your perspective, especially as an ESA just starting out this project in your region.
Sure. Like Jeff mentioned, I work for a service agency, the Capital Area Intermediate Unit, and how we started working with the robots is, I was working with Jeff, and I heard about him, and we've seen him several different places. One of our board members saw one, so we thought we would get one and see how it works. And I think when Pamela referenced about pushing and advocating for one, getting one and trying it, see how it works, is that first leap of faith that is this going to be a fit or not. So we went out in the spring of last year and purchased one, through working with the CSIU, and we got one in. And at first, we were learning about it. We were getting used to it. We were actually using it at first like a teleworking situation to see what it would like to be at home and to have somebody at work using it. Well, one of the roles the DIU has, besides working with all the students, is also information sharing. So we presented this to all our job alikes, which would be all the technology directors in our 24 school districts and 2 vote techs, all our superintendents, our board members, our special ed directors, our curriculum directors. And we spent time showing them what it does, what is a robot, because you see them on TV or you read about them on a website, but to actually see it and say, here's examples and stories of how it's used. And it really seemed to gain a lot of traction. Everybody seemed very interested. But at that time, nobody really took that step to say, I want to try it. So we purchased 2 additional ones leading into the summer to become more familiar, thinking that this potentially could pick up. It would just take 1 or 2 districts to start using it. So a couple weeks, the summer went through, a couple weeks before the school year started, we had 3 districts call for all 3 robots all in the same week. So that was interesting. So we said, okay, well, we kind of talked about our plan, but let's go out and just do it now. So we went out, and I had my help desk drive out to train each school district on how to use it. So they drove out the robot, brought it to the school district, trained them. It only took like an hour to max hour and a half to train them. Then the school district's role was to work with the families. So we were supporting the schools. The schools are closest to the child. Let the schools, support the child. And so the one school district in particular, 2 of them have it where they're planning on implementing it. They're at the early stages. The other school implemented early on. There was a 3rd grade student that was diagnosed with cancer of the summer and could not start the school year. Well, with using the robot, she was actually able to attend the first day of school, which was really exciting for the girl and the family. So they worked with the family. The principal and the teacher really took a lead. These are not real technical kind of solutions. It was important, I think, for the school to not have the tech person be the lead. It had to be the teacher, which I think Pamela was saying the teacher really embraced that lead at the school. So in this particular school, it's the teacher and the principal who really embraced that. Started off the year, she attended a couple classes, really did, but all self-contained in that classroom. It was only a few weeks later, she was riding down the hallway and going to specials, going to music, going to art, going to the different the classes. And that was pretty exciting because they said, at first, it was, an hour or 2 a day. Well, then it started lending itself, which I think, Pamela, you mentioned it, more throughout the whole day then. It was how that school district rolled it out for us. Actually, they brought it out to the family's home. and let them play with it a couple days. So the child felt familiar with it, understood how it worked, and this is what it looks like when other people see you. And then when they brought it to the school, it wasn't challenging for her at all. The only real issues were once in a while it might lose wireless connection. And they said at first it was kind of an issue, and now everyone they just pick it up and move it, and then it just goes, and nobody even gives it a second thought anymore. Very, very positive feedback from the family, from the teacher, from the third grade girl. Also, it's really added to new conversations with that school on how other ways besides just homebound instruction they use it. They have ESL populations that travel to their home countries and were out of school for several weeks, and they could use it to stay in touch with the school and the students, in their classroom. So it's been a really positive impact. It wasn't as much of a leap of faith when you actually do it than what you originally think it's going to be. You're a little nervous when you first do it, like, what are those answers? What about this, or what about this? And they did it, and it's worked well. I think one of the things that what we're doing right now as a service agency is learning from these 3 school districts to collect information. So when other schools want to implement it, they say, okay, some of the schools have been doing it, do it this way, or they've answered these questions and this is how they answer it. So I think that's the phase we're in right now with these 3, looking to potentially get more, to be able to be that lead and advocate to have robots, for these students. And it's really about being that, if a school says, I'd like to be able to use this, but they don't know things, well, at this point, I don't know, but I'm collecting that data. Our team is really collecting that data. So we can be that authoritative figure, at least as much as we can be, to say, here are some lessons learned. Really positive, like I said, really positive experience from the girl and her family and from the students. So we do plan on experiencing it. And one of the things I wanted to talk about was like the challenges. There weren't that many challenges from a technical point of view or the acceptance of the other students. It was pretty amazing how quickly the other students, the first couple of days, everybody gets a lot of attention. But after a while, they're treating her just like, as, one of the other children. Again, like Pamela said, it's not the same as being there, but they get used to it eventually, and it's a lot more seamless.
So can I chime in a little bit here? Because you wanted to talk about the challenges. Is it all right to come back in?
Sure,
okay.
Please.
Great. So there were 2 things that Dave just mentioned. One is the homebound instruction and the robot, and I want to make it clear that we had both. And I think it is really crucial to continue with the homebound instruction in addition to having the robot, because you're still missing a ton. You're not actually there. Mm-hmm. And in terms of the issues with the robot, we also experienced the lost connection quite a bit. And whenever that happened, it was my daughter's going to hate me if she ever sees this video, but she had a meltdown. Like, she was inconsolable for so long, because almost inevitably it happened during math instruction. And so she'd be following along as best as she could, clicking between screens and trying to follow along with what her teacher was doing. And it was tiny font, and she was trying to follow the procedures and working on her, and already she was lost, because even though there's that, there you can raise the hand button on the robot, if nobody was paying attention, she wouldn't get seen. So they would get three problems ahead, and she was lost, and then the connection would get lost, and she was beside herself. And it would just snowball. Like, I can't do this, I'm never going to catch up, and then they don't see me, they're not paying attention to me, and woo, woo, woo. So we would go into like a 3-hour spiral of, my life is horrible. And it was at that time. But so yes, it was certainly fantastic, but there were issues that we had to go. And Dr. Soares, we did actually bring the robot to the hospital with us when she had, when she was in 4th grade, when she already had the robot. And that was really, really crucial. The first week of classes, she had an infection. We had to go back to the hospital, and she was there for 4 or 5 days, and she would log in, and she wouldn't put the screen on, so nobody would know where she was. And she would tell the nurses, I'm at school, and some of them believed them. I don't think everyone did. But she would go for an hour at a time whenever she could, and participate from her hospital bed, and then log off, and none of her students in her class knew it.
That's great. Yeah, I wasn't aware. The other thing I will echo what you said is hospital-based telepresence to the schools should not in any way, shape, or form replace hospital-bound teachers, because they add a very crucial piece of the puzzle, which is direct instruction, working with the child, helping them through their paces, and they often are teachers who are well versed in special ed and in novel ways of doing things, and they can afford that one-on-one attention. So I've been very clear when we wanted to deploy this that this should not be viewed as, you know, replacing in any way a hospital-bound teacher. It's just that hospital-bound teachers are bound by only the districts they serve as part of their job description. So they would still help other kids, but they were not as well versed with their learning needs or their curriculum. And so I think that this is great for supplementing a hospital-based teacher, just like Pamela had said about homebound teachers.
Yeah.
When you mentioned, Pamela, about when they have technical glitches, the process we kind of used, and it seemed to work out well. The teacher was obviously the first line of defense, right? And if they see it, then they're pretty quickly fixing the problem. But they go to their tech department, and then they go to ours. And then we've worked with not only the school, but also like the families at their home. So we're working them directly at home. So far, so it's gone pretty quickly. Like when it happens, it usually is something with the wireless, and if they reset it, like it was getting on their guest network and secure network, and we realized that, and we made sure it was only on the one network. But yeah, you're right. So when there's a problem, you don't always know right away, but they've gotten better to notice those signals. So at first they don't know, and then they start getting better at those signals. So like, wait a minute, something's wrong. And then the teacher has been able to do most of the troubleshootings. Fortunately, it's not usually high level tech problems. It's more of like the front end user problems. But the process so far with that particular school district it's been well. Now, if we grew a lot of them, then we'd have to see what that looked like.
Oh, I need to add one more thing. So those are some drawbacks, but some of the fun things. So this would just be things to be aware of. One of my daughter's favorite things to do was at the end of the school day, she would take the robot for a walk, a stroll through the halls, and just pop in on other teachers, unsuspecting teachers. And it couldn't have been April Fool's because she didn't have the robot then, but one time, sometimes her teacher, Mr. Williams, would forget to turn the robot off, so she would log on at night and spy around the classroom. And one time, it was either after the school day or before the school day started, the robot was still on, and so she scared Mr. Williams. Like, I don't remember if she moved it or she snuck up on him and said, "Boo," and scared him. Like, so things kids can do for fun.
Yeah.
Awesome feedback. Just a couple questions that we've had some questions here from some of the groups, and of course some of them dealt about the movement and stuff between class. Jeff, you want to talk a little bit about what we've seen with that?
Yeah, one of the fun parts about driving a robot around the parts of a school building, you think that the Wi-Fi is great everywhere. Our first experience was one of our local districts just down the road, which happened to be the town that I lived in, and they called me like 5 different times initially, and when I went in, there was no Wi-Fi in one corner of the building. Literally, the student would drive the robot and it would just die. So the tech coordinators at that point were like, hey, well, we'll just add more Wi-Fi here and boost it. So they were thrilled because they would drive this thing around during the evenings to find out where there's lags were in Wi-Fi and fix that. One of the other things that Jeff and I did early on when we would go to trainings and present at conferences and drive them around, we literally took a MiFi and attached it to the back of the robot with Velcro. So we would turn that on and use the robot's connection to that MiFi as well as our iPad or iPhone, whatever we were using to connect to it. So we wouldn't actually depend on that Wi-Fi connection either in the conference or. So we've found ways around it, and like David said, I think the schools and the tech folk and the teachers, once they decide they really want to use this, and they're going to embrace that technology, they figure it out pretty quick. The first robot I placed, other than those calls for that corner, it was literally 2 weeks before I heard back from the teacher. And Jeff can allude, or he can tell you this, I was panicking because I was waiting for the phone call, and I would sit there, that's it, that's the phone call. So we've come pretty full circle now. A lot of the districts that I've sent these into, and we had it, 12 of the 17 of our districts within our region have had a robot in their building for kids, some through Dr. Soares' program and some through others. So the tech coordinators, the more they know about it, the more the teachers are familiar with it, especially the kids, if the kids are familiar with it. When you put one of these in their school, they're already ready to go. And the most success we had, at least with placing the robots, when I got them in quickly from the hospital call to getting them into the district, was where they already knew about it. We had already set up a robot once before. So all those things, as we're going through this process, I think they'll get easier. Technologies obviously catching up, and so I think these are going to be a nice little item to use. Really, it's just another tool to connect kids to their friends, to the school. There were the two questions that I did respond to, working out the whole, how does the student go from, if they're in 4th grade, they typically don't leave the classroom, or 3rd grade or 2nd grade. They don't typically leave the classroom, so moving the robot around the room is not a big deal. But when they're in the higher grades and they're moving from class to class, we pretty much left it to the school to figure out how to do that. We made suggestions about letting the student leave in the robot 5 minutes early before the bell rang. You guys have probably had the experience of walking through a school once the bell rings. I hadn't in about 20 years, and the first time I did it, I literally thought I was in a subway station. It was just crazy, and I thought, oh, we can't have a robot going through here. So there are those fears of knocking the robot over. The good news is the new robots that just came out actually in April, they have a better gyro system on them to keep them upright when they're hit. So Double Robotics that created these robots have made some steps in the right direction as far as that goes. And the other question was, Ron had asked about, who purchased the robots, who own them. In our experience with Dr. Soares and the hospital, they found funding to purchase 5 robots. And then the agreement that he talked about early on, I don't know how we wrote it up, but basically it says they bought them, the CSIU in our case owns them, but we only use them for hospital referrals for the students. So I don't know how we got that past 2 sets of lawyers, but we did, and that seemed to work. And my goal for this whole project was always to cut red tape and get the device in the hands of the people that needed it. And I didn't care what it took to shove this robot in a classroom. And I had a kindergarten teacher that didn't want it for the student. And I went and I brought it into her classroom, and I handed her my iPhone, and I said, just drive it. That's all I want you to do. Just drive it around the classroom. Within about 20 minutes, she was driving around the classroom. Oh my God, this is easy. 3 days later, we put the robot back in her classroom for one of her kindergarten students. So I think it's just that fear of, what is this thing? It's going to disrupt my classroom. I think if we just get out there and get rid of all the technology blocks, get rid of all the issues of connecting, and then let them realize that, again, this is just a tool. It's just a device to connect people in a different way than we're used to. So I appreciate that, with David and Pamela and Dr. Soares, you guys have given Jeff and I, at least in our experience, a huge, we don't get to see it, but we get to hear what what you guys are doing with them. So the fact that we went to our board and said, come on, let us buy a couple, because we like to play with toys, technology toys. It was a godsend that you guys figured out how to use them and figured out good uses for them and are now putting them into use. So I thank you guys for that.
Thanks, Jeff. Are there any other questions from the group out there? While we're waiting for questions, Dr. Soares, any final comments as we kind of wrap things up for the day? Final comments and thoughts?
Yeah, I think I'll echo what Jeff said, is that you need champions. You need champions at every level. You need a parent champion. You need a school-based technology champion, and you need a healthcare-based champion. Because what we're trying to do somewhat flies in the face of the traditional, of what's normally done. And if you don't have somebody persisting to overcome the roadblocks, somebody persisting to find ways, to find solutions, this thing can die very quickly, because it is a tremendous thing, but it doesn't give a lot of people the ROI, the return on investment. Hospitals don't see this as a financial ROI. School systems have to deal sometimes with personnel who might find this intrusive at some level or suspicious at another level. And parents might say, what all is this going to take from me? How is this going to benefit my child? A very good question came up. Will my child be considered present in class? A parent asked. And would you believe it, Pennsylvania had no regulations on the book for such an unusual situation. And after consensus of several of the IU directors, they go, yes, this would be considered present, because it mattered for the parents that the child had good attendance. And they said, if this is going to be counted as a present day, then that's great. And this is not something we could have anticipated. Another great question that came up from the hospital, a neonatal intensive care doctor said, well, what about my patients? And I'm thinking, there is no way a newborn baby is connecting to school. And I smiled and I go, are you serious? And she goes, for my teen mother parents, they're the ones sitting with their baby. And I go, you're right. I'm so sorry. I've been so focused on the units and where the children are. I forget that those are children too, that they're in school. Some of them are in high school. They're missing school because they're with their fragile newborn baby in the intensive care. And I said, I'm so sorry. I didn't write it into this proposal. I will do better next time. There are amazing lessons to be learned from this type of thing. But I think it takes the champions at every level to push this forward, because it's so easy to say your funding's run out. We can't cover the personnel to deploy this. We don't have the space to store this. Goodbye. And you've just got to persist and say, this is the lessons learned. These are the anecdotal things. This is the research data. The research is very nascent. We're trying to build a research base for this. But because these are not, you're not going to have 20 kids doing it at any one time, because all of the different obstacles. So I think that it's an incremental body of research. There's not going to be any one place which says, we enrolled 75 kids this week. It's unlikely to happen, especially in smaller hospitals. It might happen in massive tertiary care centers, but they have their own roadblocks when it comes to bureaucracy. Just my 2 cents.
Very, very, very well said, Dr. Soares. I mean, couldn't say it better. Awesome. And I really appreciate your support and vision and helping to lead that charge. David, any final thoughts from you for the group?
No, just along those lines of there's going to be a lot of unanswered questions when you first decide to roll it out. You just got to accept the fact, let's say, let's try it and let's do it. Whether you're a family concern or a school or a service agency, we didn't have any families that needed it when we first purchased them, and we wanted to learn about them to see if there was a fit. It certainly seems like there's going to be. Over this next year, we're collecting that data to help make those informed decisions for schools. But I would say, the only, when people worry about the financial drawback, it's not that expensive. Surprisingly, when I share the cost of what a robot is, they're like, that's it. They think it's going to be a lot more, and in our current situation, we own the robots and we're letting the schools use them. But I could see that grow into many different models where a school might buy it or they might use ours. So just go ahead and try it, see where it takes. If it doesn't work for that particular child, it doesn't work. But I think there are going to be plenty that do. And it'll be interesting as Dr. Suarez, as you collect data on like the experiences as this grows, to see where it takes us. Because you can see it from the reactions of the kids on how they're having that positive reaction they're having from it.
Thanks, David. And just to kind of echo what David kind of alluded to, I know throughout the state, I know there's a lot of sports teams, foundations, local, community organizations, and so forth that I know across the country. I mean, when it's explained and people understand and get it, I mean, they've stepped up. I mean, the Pittsburgh Penguins Foundation stepped up to buy a robot for a little boy, out in the Pittsburgh area, as well. So again, it's like there's certainly, I don't think there's any lack of organizations that would be more than willing to help support. It's just getting that awareness and that people understand, how the technology is being used.
And we're looking at a model that if we're going to purchase them and then we'll let schools lease them from us. And when the lease price equals the price of the robot, then it's theirs. So that way we cover the repairs if they only need it for like 3 or 4 weeks. But if they're going to have it for an extended amount of time, then they might as well just own that robot, So that way we'll keep maintaining them. But then after, like I said, so many weeks, if they have it for that long time, then they would own it. That's the model that we've been going with. Right now, they're all using our robots at no cost because they're part of that pilot to collect data so we can provide a better service to our schools and our families.
Right, good point. Pamela, last but not least, any final thoughts for the group for today?
Just that it is so worth it. Dr. Torres once mentioned earlier today about how the kids in the hospital were not overly excited sometimes if they had to go to school. And certainly my daughter did get to that point where she's like, I got to go to school. But it was all an act because she loved it. One of the things she craved most when she was either at home or in the hospital during that year was the sense of normalcy or normality, and being just like the other kids. She was sick of being different and always everything. It's not a typical 9-year-old, and this is not my life. And so being able to go back to school was a routine that was what she viewed as what her life should be. So even though she couldn't physically be there, the idea that she could see and participate and be a part of that world was so huge. And she would complain, but she secretly loved it.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Okay. I think we have one question that just came in here. Did we have a questions? Maybe not. There we go. Just again, thank you for your presentation from one of our things. Good luck and Godspeed to the little girl with cancer. And really appreciate that. I really thank you for everybody for tuning in, and Dr. Suarez, David, and Pamela. I appreciate you're sharing your story with us and participating in this. And like I say, we will be archiving this. It'll be available to all the NAMTC members as well as anyone else that would be interested in learning more about this project. So again, I guess with that, just a quick plug. If you're a NAMTC member, our Leadership Summit is coming up here November 29th and 30th in Savannah, Georgia, which isn't too bad the end of November. Would love to have you participate in that. And with that, I guess we will bring this shared conversation to a close. Again, I want to thank our panelists and participants, and hope to see and talk to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay.